4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome today to the Protective Social and Services Committee, February 1st, 2022. With me today, as on the members, are Councilor Bressie, Councilor Thiessen, Mayor Clayton, and myself, Kevin O'Toole. And at this point in time, we have no delegations, and we have item 3, 2 reports. 3.1 is the Director Service Area Report. And Mr. Manuel, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. In community social development, we have the Passionate Heart event, which will be held virtually on February 14th at 11:30 a.m. Nominations for this event closed on January 28th. However, the Women of Influence Award will be held virtually March 8th, and nominations for that award are open until February 15th. In enforcement services, City Enforcement reports that their property agent program is being well subscribed, and has announced that the Public School Board has signed on to the program and has authorized enforcement to remove unwanted persons trespassing on their property. So good start to that program. Calls for service. With the changing weather, there have been numerous calls relating to sidewalk clearing. So enforcement's working with communications to assist in getting the message out to citizens about keeping the sidewalks clear, particularly when the weather permits. Everybody appreciates how difficult it can be to remove built up ice, but as the temperature climbs, it's an opportunity to do so. Certainly, administration and council, I'm aware, have all heard from people with accessibility issues that are limited in their movement because of this. Additionally, the Alberta Penalty Information System, which was supposed to roll out February 1st, which is a change to the way in which traffic tickets are issued in the province, has been delayed at this time for approximately 90 days while the government performs further study and citizen consultation. We will keep council informed on this one because the municipality had to incur fairly significant expenses to prepare for this, and if it changes direction, I suspect it may be an advocacy item that council might want to consider to ask the province to recuperate the funds we had to spend to prepare for this. But just a note. In the fire department, reports that for the first time ever, GP 911 had to be activated as an emergency backup center for Strathcona County, who were experiencing COVID-related staffing implications that resulted in us receiving all the 911 and fire dispatching responsibilities from that municipality for a period of time. So it was the first real test for our backup system. Parkland County and Strathcona are both backups to Grande Prairie. So it's nice to know that the service will still be able to be delivered with those impacts in mind. And the RCMP, not only has the RCMP recently deployed their first Facebook page, they have also launched their first TikTok account. So this is a pilot project that RCMP and K Division, which is Alberta, are running. And they see it as a new opportunity to engage people and demographic on a platform they may not have otherwise. So anybody looking to connect with them can look up the username at RCMP Alberta or at GRC Alberta if they wish to follow the account. One thing of note here is online criminal record checks. There's a pilot project that's been ran at the detachment for online criminal record checks for the past number of months. Unfortunately, Grande Prairie so far has had the lowest pickup of all the pilot project locations. This is something we'd really, really like to encourage people to take on, alternatively as to attending in person at the detachment. Anybody that's been to the RCMP detachment would appreciate there's very limited parking and there can be a fair bit of congestion in the front lobbies. Submitting those criminal record checks via the online process is going to be a much more efficient and more likely less aggravating experience. So really want to remind people that that's going to be available. We are working with some of our significant volunteer-based organizations such as minor hockey and soccer to apprise them of that opportunity as well. Additionally, there's going to be a virtual town hall hosted by the RCMP detachment in the city, which is scheduled for Wednesday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. using Zoom. Their registration for the event will be open starting February 9th, and communications will continue to push out information regarding that. And that's the highlights for this week.
Thank you very much. Just got a few questions in the queue here. So, Councilor Bressy, go ahead.
Great, thank you. You mentioned the administrative penalties delay, and that's actually something I want to ask a question about. You have predicted the question I'm going to have, but is it possible, and if you don't have it right now, that's okay, but is it possible for council just to get a high-level estimate of about what those costs were for us to prepare for that?
Certainly, I'll return that at a future date here. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's certainly, the process has been in development for at least the last 3 years, so.
Yeah, and am I correct in assuming, I know a lot of staff time would have gone into that, am I correct in assuming that we probably made some technology purchases for that as well?
We've made hardware, software, as well as trained every staff member, plus trained the trainers. It's been a significant endeavor on our part, for sure.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you very much for the question. Councillor Bosch. Anybody else? I thought your hand was up, sorry. Looking around, anybody else not in the committee? Okay, then thank you very much, Mr. Manuel, for your report. Moving on to 3.2, Indigenous Advisor position, and Miss Angela Sutherland. Are you ready or on cue? There you are. Look at that smile. Go ahead.
Hi,
the
good
floor
morning,
is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to report back to committee with a job description and a brief summary of engagement conducted for the Indigenous Advisor position. So a bit of a background. In September of 2020, Mr. Len Auger, a delegation representing our Community Advisory Board on Housing and Homelessness, came forward to council and recommended the need for the City of Grande Prairie to hire an Indigenous liaison. The goal is to help improve communication and build and maintain positive relationships between the city and the Indigenous community. So at that time, the administration was directed to draft a job description based on a consultation and provide a scope of work and report back. So back in November of that year, the administration held several consultations with over 12 key stakeholders. We're in the depths of the pandemic, so we provided several options for engagement, whether it was in person, one-on-one phone calls, video call-in, as well as by telephone. Through that consultation, key themes emerged around the scope of work. So some of the key items were the community felt that this position needed to provide leadership, cultural expertise, consultation, and direction to really advance, guide, and develop the city's strategic commitment to reconciliation with Indigenous people. There's also a lot of oversight for the development of appropriate corporate strategies and processes to support the organization to implement the calls to action for truth and reconciliation. There was a lot of discussion around cultural awareness training and teaching, providing recommendations on that, developing partnerships, moving policies and procedures and engagement strategies, and really being that conduit to connect the Indigenous community with our organization. Although there were variances in approaches and perspectives to Indigenous relations, there was really a resounding recognition that there is ongoing work that must be done to enhance and improve our relations with Indigenous people, and the truth and reconciliation call to action. There was a lot of discussion as well around the title and scope of the position. And there was a bit of a dialogue between being called an Indigenous Advisor versus a liaison. An advisor position would more support a corporate lens and report to the city manager or up somewhere in the corporate realm, whereas a liaison more indicated a more frontline outreach, events, relationship kind of position. So I think there was a resounding agreement that if the city wanted to really support a commitment to truth and reconciliation, that this position should be an advisor type position with a corporate lens. As you're all aware, after the 2020 budget deliberations, Council had endorsed the budget, and at that time we were directed to come back and provide this report. So at that time, administration went back to the original consultation group to garner any additional feedback. Those that responded stated that remained supportive of the position. So as we know, the City of Grande Prairie has committed to taking the steps to honor the Truth and Reconciliation call to action. And by this, having this position, it is really that important step in building that reconciliation framework for the city and improve our relations with the Indigenous communities and opportunities to advance truth and reconciliation. There continues to be a recognition across Canada regarding the importance of this and building that shared understanding and partnership between municipalities and Indigenous communities. Administration has, as an attachment, added the scope of work for the advisor position for your review, which was provided with input from our consultations. So at this time, I'd be open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We do have one person in queue, Councilor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole first, and thank you, Ms. Sutherland, for your information. I'm curious, is this a full-time position, three-quarter, half?
Through the chair, administration is recommending a full-time position.
And do we know the cost of this position at this point? I know, but I don't know what it is.
Through the chair, I believe that at the budget deliberations, I think that Director Manuel can confirm, I think there was $100,000 allocated for the position.
Thank you.
Okay. Looking for anybody else. Councillor Thiessen and then Councillor Bressie.
Thank you very much, Chair O'Toole, and thank you so much, Angela, Ms. Sutherland, for this report and for doing your due diligence and bringing this forward to us. I'm very supportive of this position and adding it to I guess the city workforce. My question to you is if this were to pass at council, how long for recruitment of the Indigenous Advisor position?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I would recommend that, as was discussed in the last committee meeting when we were talking about the TRC, that I think as council goes into the strategic planning, really decide on what through council's lens, on what they see as priorities for Indigenous reconciliation strategies. I think that would be an important step. And then in terms of the recruitment, I would say that we would have to go through our processes for HR. It would probably be from the time we recruit. I imagine it would be maybe within 1 to 2 months, depending on the candidate.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Bressie.
Sorry, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Thiessen actually asked the questions I want to ask, but if there's nobody else on the floor, I'm happy to make the motion.
You go right ahead, sir.
Great. In that case, I would move that committee recommend council direct administration to proceed with the Indigenous Advisor position. And just to speak to this, a wise man once said, "Your words mean nothing when your actions speak volumes." And I think this is real action we're taking, not just to say that we care about truth and reconciliation, but to make sure we've got the corporate resources to make sure that we're actually taking concrete action to further it. I think there's a lot we received. I believe it was last committee meeting, but it's been recently. We received a report on some of the actions the city's taken, but I think those were relatively low-hanging fruits that we've done in the past, and I'm glad we did them. But I think that more action is needed, and I think this position really could help with it. And I know I've heard from our Indigenous communities that this position itself would be a significant step forward in building relationships and building a better community where everybody has what they need to succeed.
Thank you. Motion's in order. So, call for the vote. That carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Sutherland, for your report. Very thorough. I actually read that twice last night, so I see the number of things that were on the on there that I didn't realize that what we were looking for. So that was a great thing. Thank you. Move on to correspondence. We have none. We have other business, and item 5.1 is the living wage for Alberta. Councilor Bressie, you brought this up.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor O'Toole. So this is something that I wanted to get flagged, and just a little bit of background for council and committee. There's this calculation that gets done across the country for a living wage, and kind of what my understanding of what the idea of a living wage is it's a calculation of what wage does somebody actually have to make in your community, taking into account the basic costs such as shelter, food, utilities, things like that. What does somebody need to make in your community not to live in abject poverty, to actually be able to afford the necessities of life? And my understanding of the history is there used to be an organization called Living Wage Canada, which did calculations, and I know I've seen, based on them, old calculations for what a living wage in Grande Prairie was. But as far as I can tell, they're not doing that anymore. Now there's a new organization called Living Wage Alberta, which is doing a living wage calculation for a lot of communities across Alberta, but Grande Prairie is not on that list, and I'd like to see us get onto that list. So the motion I'd like to make is that committee direct administration to report back with information on the Alberta Living Wage Network, including its goals and what will be required for the City of Grande Prairie to join. So there's a network that includes municipalities. I'd like us to find out what would it take for us to join that so we can get a living wage calculation for Grande Prairie. And there's two big benefits that I see to getting a living wage calculation for us. One is the really obvious social oriented perspective of figuring out is our actual average wage, as Statistics Canada say, does that actually give people the necessities of life? How many people do we have above and below that living wage? I think that when we're talking about housing, when we're talking about food security, when we're talking about a bunch of the things that we talk around this table to help our most vulnerable residents, I think having that living wage would really help with those conversations. I also think, though, that there's an economic development piece here and a labor attraction piece here, where in past, I think people often look at Grande Prairie when they're thinking about moving here, and they assume we're a really expensive northern community. I often hear people say, hey, it must be really expensive to live in Grande Prairie, like it's really expensive to live in Wood Buffalo. And what I've seen in past living wage calculations is actually we're usually closer to Edmonton than we are to Wood Buffalo, because shelter costs a lot more here. And I think having an actual calculation that shows actually Grande Prairie is a really affordable city to live in would really help with our labor attraction, our economic development piece. So I think there's a bunch of benefits to a living wage, and I hope that committee will support this motion. And again, just to be really clear, this motion isn't saying, hey, administration, go do this, but saying, hey, we'd like to know how we would go about this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bressie. I've got a couple people that want to make some comments or answer some questions. Mr. Manuel, go ahead.
Through the chair, Councilor Bressie, I have some good news for you, because I learned this morning that we are sitting on that committee right now, and we actually do have the calculations you're looking for. So we're going to be able to report back to you with the information you're looking for.
Well, excellent. Worth noting, I did touch base with the administration a couple of weeks ago, and I maybe should have followed up again. I didn't receive that, so that's why I brought it to committee. But that's good to hear. And we're not on the Living Wage Alberta website, so I'm excited to get that reported back here. But also, if I may, I'd love to make. Could I withdraw my motion? Since it sounds like it's redundant.
Sounds like it's a good idea. It's up to you.
Okay.
Well, administration, just to be clear, administration's still willing to come back with a report on it. We did just confirm it looks like the website's actually just been updated as well to include the Grande Prairie specific info. So your motion was very timely.
Look at how effective I am. Look at how effective I
So
am.
you're
I
a little
said
bit
I'd
behind
not be
times,
doing
Mr.
government.
Bressy. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so maybe I would. So I'd love to withdraw my first motion, and maybe the motion I'd like to make then is direct administration to come back with a report on what a living wage in Grande Prairie is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manuel, for being so efficient and quick. Well, there you go. Well, we're done with the questions now. We'll move on to 5.2. Oh, we got a vote. Well, it was taken away and then it was brought back, so. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5.2, residential lighting, and I'm not sure who, Mr. Manuel, you're on queue again.
Certainly, thanks, Mr. Chair. So this was a referral from a delegation that appeared at council regarding a concern he was having with his next door neighbor. Administration at this point has received information indicating that that situation has likely remedied itself, and that one of the parties involved has, we were led to believe that they were relocating as of yesterday. So we're just awaiting confirmation that that had actually occurred. But if it had not, there's been discussion internally, and we have a interim path forward where we can apply some legislation found within the land use bylaw. And if that was unsuccessful, then I'd come forward asking that we make an amendment to likely our public nuisance disturbances noise bylaw as well. So at this point, administration thinks it's likely remedied at this point. We'll have confirmation in the next few hours. But if it hasn't been, we'll proceed with the internal enforcement action that we believe is available to us. And if there's a problem remaining after that, we can report back to council. But we believe the matter is going to be resolved.
Thank you very much for staying on track on this one. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Director Manuel, is there an expectation that the bylaw may need to add a section? And that's up to us to pass that, correct?
Through the chair, that is a fair question. So administration's considered the circumstances in this situation and looked back over the course of the last number of years, in my case, over 10 years. And this is the first instance that we've had a concern like this elevate to this level. So given that it's what I would view anyways as a bit of a one-off, and it looks like the situation is going to rectify itself anyways, at this point, I'm not sure that a legislative solution is necessary.
Thank you.
All right. We have, thank you for that information. And just got kicked out of our secured system here. And with that, we have no bylaw and policy reviews to deal with today. Item 7 is the in-camera, and 7.1 is a FOIPAC services section 24. And I asked to go in camera. Motion.
Thank you very much, Chair O'Toole. I would move that we go into camera.
Thank you very much. 8, which is the outstanding items list. And Director Manuel, if you could go through this, please.
Certainly can. So item 1175, in hindsight, is something that we perhaps could have talked about in camera, but I can say the update at this time is the item's slightly delayed, as in the delegation that appeared before council has initiated legal or has indicated they're initiating legal action. So at this point, administration has ceased communication regarding that matter with them until that's through the more formal legal process. In regard to action 1174, I believe that was met today, and I would recommend we remove that, and the remaining items remain on track.
All right. So I'm looking for a motion, and I see Councillor Thiessen. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair Kevin O'Toole. In the spirit that one person's sunset is another person's sunrise, I would move that we accept the outstanding items list as amended.
Thank you. And with that, I call for a vote. Go ahead, and that is carried unanimously. And with that, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.
So, Council, if I could ask that we, it appears to me based on scheduling of standing committee that